Welcome to the LeaderCast podcast, a weekly deep dive into the stories that transformed our guests into leaders worth following. I'm your host, Joe Boyd. If you've been enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for being a listener. One simple thing you can do to help us out is give a review wherever you listen. This week's episode is an extra special one. Our guest is Rainn Wilson. You know him as Dwight from The Office, as well as a bunch of other amazing roles. He's also the founder of Soul Pancake, and the author of the brand new book, Soul Boom, Why We Need Spiritual Revolution, and the new Peacock TV series, The Geography of Bliss. I had an opportunity to chat with Rainn for our Shift program, and today we're sharing the entire interview, including an additional 30 minutes of the conversation that was not played during the program. I love what he had to say about inclusive leadership, happiness, and realizing your full potential, and I'm confident you're going to love it too. Rainn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Joe, for having me. Thank you, LeaderCast. Thrilled to be here virtually and to have this conversation with you all.
One of the things I wonder about someone in your position, you weren't a known commodity until The Office for the most part, right? And then obviously that role changed your career and changed your life. And then you haven't done that for a lot of years now. So just at a big picture level, when you think through like the seasons of your life, what have you learned about shifting from kind of one kind of focus to another or one opportunity to another?
Wow, that's a great question. And it really is very apt for me and my career, because I shifted from being just a weird character actor doing lots of different parts on TV shows like Charmed and Law and Order, SVU, and weird little movies like House of a Thousand Corpses and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, I got this amazing role on The Office. And I was a little bit older. I was 39 when I got cast as Dwight. So I'd already been acting for 14, 15 years before I started that adventure. And then that was a whole other chapter. And so there's a shift from my role being, character actor that you slot in if you need a kind of a quirky character, to all of a sudden becoming a television star, for lack of a better word. But I think the thing that I really learned from that shift was a word I've been thinking a lot about. My wife and I work in the nonprofit sector a lot right now, with Lide Haiti, this organization that we founded. And the word is capacity and capacity building. And what was odd was that when I became well known as Dwight, all of a sudden a lot of offers started coming in. And studios would say, hey, do you want to write a script? And someone would say, hey, do you want to direct a commercial in a short film? Or someone would say, hey, what if you want to write a book? Someone would say, hey, do you want to start a production company? And I had never really thought about doing these things before. I had dabbled a little bit in some writing. And what I realized was I had a much higher capacity than I previously thought of myself. When I thought of myself contained in this little role as quirky character actor, my capacity, I viewed myself as having a very limited capacity. I just wanted to be a quirky guy playing the fourth or fifth lead on a sitcom or something like that, and being able to buy a house. That was really all I wanted. And then all of a sudden, cut to several years into The Office, I'd written a book, I'd started a production company, I'd written some scripts, I'd directed some things, I'd started a nonprofit. I realized my capacity personally was much larger than I ever thought of it previously. And there was a specific event that highlighted this. And it was that when I was an unemployed actor in Los Angeles, trying to, auditioning for Cheerios commercials and guest spots on, Law and Order, I started writing a screenplay in a notebook by hand, just writing down ideas it was a TV show idea. And I wrote several pages, and I read them and I was like, oh, this sucks. And I threw it in a box somewhere. Years later, we moved one place, we moved another place, we moved another place. And I found this old box and I was unpacking it. I found the notebook and I opened it up and I read those ideas that I had written at this point, 10 years previous. And, they were pretty good. It wasn't great stuff, but it was like, oh, there's a really good germ of an idea here. Why did I cut myself short? Why did I cut myself off at the knees and say, this sucks, and eliminated it? Because we have such limiting beliefs about ourselves sometimes. So, and now I've been able to do a lot more writing. It's been really exciting, and it's a kind of a creative part of my life that in some ways I'm enjoying more than acting right now. So when you asked about shifting, I was thinking about sometimes ways we don't shift is because we hold ourselves back with these limited beliefs. And probably, unless you're watching and you're some narcissistic CEO and you think that you're the greatest CEO on the planet Earth and you have an overinflated view of yourself, chances are
there are for sure some of those, by the way, Rainn.
I'm sure
for sure a few of those, but most of them aren't. So yeah.
But most of us hold ourselves back. So that was a really valuable lesson I learned for myself. And when I speak to young people, I always talk about that, to say that you are probably, Joe, you are probably capable of doing a lot more than you think you are right now. Does that make sense?
Yes. You did not talk to my wife before this, right? That was your own idea. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of people here that are good leaders who want to become better leaders. And part of when you're a good leader is you get more opportunities in any situation. I love what you're saying about capacity. How in your life, I'm sure you also maybe often have more opportunities than you have time, or emotional capacity or intellectual capacity or whatever. How do you decide, like, I need to push myself here because I have more capacity, versus, no, I just got to say no to some of these great opportunities because I can't do it all?
That's a great question. And it is an ongoing struggle with me and for so many of us. I like to challenge myself. So when I get up, like, I don't like to do unscripted television shows. It's personally, it's great. It's wonderful entertainment. It's not something I'm that interested in. But, when they called about doing Bear Grylls Running Wild, I did this show where Bear Grylls takes celebrities out into the wilderness and you go on an adventure physically and also emotionally. And he's talking about, my father had passed away recently. And I jumped at the opportunity because it was an opportunity to really push myself beyond my comfort zone, to take a risk. So there I was, hanging from a ladder 30 feet under a helicopter that was flying 50 miles an hour over the Utah mountains. And I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I never want to do it again. But so for me, it's a lot about, like, have I done this before? And I'm always up for new challenges. So what I try and take in is, you're right, I try and take in and take on projects that will push me to the next level. I have an opportunity right now to write a book about a lot of, some would call them leadership ideas, some would call it spiritual ideas. It's about personal transformations, about making the world a better place. And this is it's hard to write a book on this topic, and I'd never done it before. And when this opportunity presented itself, again, I'm saying yes to that. So then I'm saying no to playing a lot of quirky characters on sitcoms, which I've done. So I'm saying no to a lot of that. And I'm saying yes to a lot of opportunities. And I guess the thing that I came away with is that, when you work with a company, a lot of times that company will have a mission. The company will have a vision. And sometimes as a CEO or leader of a company or high up in a company, you've inherited that. And it can be, Waldo's sock company, but they've been around for 100 years. And it's like, our mission is to provide quality socks at an affordable price. And we love our customers. And we've been in, Roanoke, Virginia for 100 years. And you're carrying that mantle, that vision, that mission of that company. But I think we, as human beings and as potential leaders ourselves, we have to have a mission. We have to have a vision for ourselves. And hopefully our personal mission or a personal vision aligns with the mission and vision of whatever company or a job we're undertaking. So those two things move side by side. And for me, my personal mission and vision is to become a better and better human being. That's it. It's just I want to be working on myself all the time. I want to be kinder and wiser and more compassionate. And I also want to get smarter and learn different skill sets and use the tools that I have to help make the world a better place, to support my family, make my family better. Hopefully, I don't always succeed. But so I was thinking about that in terms of leadership, about vision and mission, both personally and at the group level.
Yeah, I'd like to dive into that a little deeper, because many of my friends, at least, are asking questions around purpose and meaning. And I wonder how you would speak to that when, what would your best advice be if someone who finds themselves in a position where maybe they've got a pretty good job, pretty good team, they're pretty good at it, but they start to have that inner dialogue of, I just don't know if I'm made for this. I don't know if this is my purpose. I don't want to give the rest of my life to this. How do people navigate through that sort of internal voice that says maybe it's time to do something new?
And I think this is good. I think that should be embraced. I think that feeling should be embraced. Now, what we do with that feeling is something else. Not everyone necessarily has the circumstances where they can say, you've got a couple of kids at home. You can't just say, honey, I'm going to give up being an accountant or a machinist or, whatever they're doing, a driver or what have you. And I want to go be a poet. And, it may not work. It may not work that way for a lot of people. Maybe some have the luxury. Maybe they're young enough and they're flexible enough to be able to have that luxury, or well off enough to be able to do that. But I think there's a lot of ways to make a difference and to find meaning. And it doesn't have to always be from career. We live in the Western world in a very career-oriented viewpoint. And I imagine a lot of people are focused on developing their careers, developing their skills, networking, wanting to take their skills to the next level in terms of earning potential. And that's all great. That's all valuable. I did that as well. But also, we don't have to necessarily get the meaning of who we are in the world just from the work that we do 40 or 50 hours a week. We can get meaning from other directions. So I think that impulse doesn't necessarily warrant a career change. I'm sounding really old and conservative. Probably if you would talk to me 10 years ago, I'd go like, take that, leave your job, go, fly, be free, make waves, change the world. But now I'm old and grizzled and gray. But the other thing I will say is that one of Oprah's favorite people to quote is the Reverend Howard Thurman. And he has this fantastic quote, and it says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs are people who have come alive. And I was thinking about this recently. I was talking to a friend of mine's son, and he was 22 and he just graduated college. And his dad was kind of a finance guy. And I was asking, so what are you going to do now? And he's like, well, I got a finance degree and I'm going to go and move and probably get a job in finance. And, and he kind of was like, and I was like, huh, you don't sound too inspired. What do you really want to do? And then his eyes lit up and he was talking about like, I want to plan concerts and I want to host events and bring people together. And I want to do, basically he wanted your job, Joe. Will you hire this kid? I'm going to send you his resume. His eyes lit up about all this other stuff that he wanted to do. And my heart broke a little bit because he had this pressure of like, oh, I should go do this job in finance. That's where I got my degree in. That's what my dad wants me to do. But really do what makes you come alive. And he would probably end up being in finance and doing finance and giving people a lot of jobs, making people a lot of money, creating a tremendous amount of opportunity. If he was going with whatever this event, concert planning, bringing people together impulse that he had, he'd probably be looking at eventually 5-10 years from now, books and ledgers filled with finances that, so do what makes you come alive is, to me, great advice for young people, but great advice for leaders and future leaders as well.
That's the Joseph Campbell follow your bliss stuff too, right? And I have two kids, they're 22 and 20 and trying to figure it out. And part of my dad advice is follow your bliss as much as you can. If you can help me pay the bills, that's awesome. And and in doing that, you probably won't end up like right where you think you will, but going that direction will give you a path, right? And you'll find it as you go. I know it's been true for your story. Hey, we got you here, so let's try to get some like Hollywood dirt or something. I don't know, but no, I don't want you to name names, but I'd love for you to talk about if the first one should be easy, right? Who's a great leader that you think of in your profession, whether that was a director or a producer or maybe someone with your nonprofit, anyone that you have followed in your life and you would say that's a leader worth following. And if we want to have a little fun without naming names, if you've ever had a leader who wasn't worth following, what lessons did you learn from that sort of situation? But we can start with the easy one, and feel free to name names. Who was a great leader throughout your career that you love to follow?
John Krasinski. No, I'm kidding. I don't know how he is as a leader. He's a good director and actor. You know, that's a great question. The first thing that popped into my head, I had several names come up, but the first thing that popped into my head was Greg Daniels, who is the showrunner of The Office. And he doesn't get a lot of accolades. Showrunner is the head producer, head writer, kind of, you know, it's like just like what the name says. They're running the show. They're making all the decisions from casting to approving scripts to dealing with the networks and final cuts in the editing room, et cetera, budgets. And Greg is the kind of unsung, very quiet leader of The Office. And we would not have a show without him. We would certainly not have had a successful show without him. And I guess when you would meet this guy, you would not think that this is a leader. He's very quiet. He's very nerdy and nebbishy. He went to Harvard. You know, he's always reading giant books of philosophy. But what I learned from Greg was that a great leader is a great collaborator, and he learned how to create a collaborative environment. And that was it. He would always have the final say, but he never did that in a dictatorial fashion. It was always just like, I think we're going to end up just doing this. But he was open to everything. Actors would come in the editing room and work with the editors and the editors would show them different scenes, and the actors would say, what if you cut here? And what if you did that? Writers would be on the set pitching lines. Actors would come up, not in a scene, watching a scene, pitch lines and jokes for a scene that they weren't in. Actors would go to the writer's room and pitch story ideas, and come up with, funny bits and cold opens and whatnot. And Greg he was so kind of secure because he had been a writer on Seinfeld and Saturday Night Live and The Simpsons. He had worked on some of the greatest comedies, of the century. He was secure enough to allow this environment. It never got out of hand, but it was, and this can be dangerous. We would as actors give each other notes, and which can be a dangerous thing sometimes on a set, but we knew each other, loved each other, trusted each other enough. So this creative, collaborative environment is what made The Office, because, we would, as actors, we would do what was scripted, and then we would improvise, and we'd improvise off of it, or we'd just throw the script away and just take the story in another direction. And then Greg would always say, when you get to the editing room, what's funny wins. Whatever's funniest wins out and goes in the episode. So have at it. Good luck. If you can bring more comedy, God bless you. So be it. So between, the editors, the writers, the producers, the actors, everyone, I would have like the assistant camera guy come up and go, hey, what if Dwight said blah, 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 blah? And I'd be like, oh, good idea. And I would take notes from the assistant camera operator. So that's leadership to me. I think I have even a problem with the word leadership. Like I hear leadership. And I think about this kind of old-fashioned Eisenhower era kind of like, big, tall man who's got all the answers, and he's the CEO, and he's absolutely rock solid confident, and he lays it down exactly how it's going to be, and everyone is following him, and oh wow, he's such a great leader. And um, I struggle with that. Now, there's nothing wrong with being strong. There's nothing wrong with having answers. There's nothing wrong with being passionate about something and knowing what direction you want to take something. But I guess it's in the how, and that collaborative impulse will create something, I believe, ultimately lasting. Now, it's not a free for all commune. There's got to be someone at the end of the day making those decisions. But The Office is kind of proof in the pudding about the value of that way of working.
A lot of people may not know the whole history of The Office, but it was kind of behind the eight ball the whole time early on, right? It almost didn't get renewed, and it was. I know there were some shifts between season 1 and 2 that Greg Daniels did. When you think back of that very first year, trying to see if you're going to get picked up and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Is there any specific thing you remember of Greg doing as a leader that maybe you thought, oh, maybe I wouldn't have thought to do that, but that was the right thing to do right there? Something, any moments from those
one of the things
days?
And one of the things that he did is he realized that, between the first year and the second year of the show, a little movie called The 40-Year-Old Virgin came out, and Steve Carell was all of a sudden a big movie star. And so this was an asset to us. And I don't know if you remember, but in season 1, Steve had his hair kind of slicked back, and you could kind of see he was thinning a little bit. He was a little bit paunchier. And Greg and the producers really decided, like, listen, Steve's a handsome guy. He's a good looking. Let's not try and make him look. We're not going to make him look pretty, but we're not going to make him look uglier than he is. And let's really shift Michael's character to have a bigger heart. Let Steve go more free and improvise more. In those first 5 or 6 episodes, he was still great, and they're great episodes. They're classic episodes: Healthcare, The Alliance, Diversity Day. We were kind of finding our footing, but I think one of the big changes they did is in season 2, they just let Steve go. They let him be as handsome as he normally is, and allowed the character to have more heart and be more likable. So that, combined with his movie stardom, I think really helped the show and ultimately defined the tone of the show. So the show is in a constant process of kind of shifting and reinventing.
Well, I'll give you the opportunity if you want to tell a nameless story of a leader not worth following.
Yeah, I mean, just to go to the opposite of that, my very first TV gig, it was 3 or 5 episodes playing a homicidal stand-up comic. I know, typecasting, on One Life to Live. And the lead actor, they filmed a rehearsal, and it was really rough and not very good. And he flipped out, and he was like, I told you we're not going to do that. And he was kicking furniture. He was throwing chairs. He was screaming. He had a fit. This guy had an absolute fit. And my jaw dropped. I had been doing like Shakespeare plays and like little theater plays and whatnot. Here was this, soap opera star going ballistic. And they were like, okay, we're shutting down production, and we'll call you when we need you back. And they kind of let me go for the day, and it was like, ooh. And I just thought in my head, like, oh, this is how people act in Hollywood, because I'd read all the stories like, oh, there's, temper tantrums and whatnot, and diva fits. And so I just thought, oh, well, that's what people do. They get a little power and they get a lead role, and then they throw furniture. I'd never seen it since. I've heard of it happening a few times, but I think that the the proof is that that guy never really worked again, and no one's ever really heard of him. I can't even remember his name, and it doesn't work. So that was a leader not worth following.
There you go. And sometimes you can lead and not have the position of leader too, right? If you're number one on the call sheet, people are going to be looking to you to see what's up, and
That's right.
You don't want to be the guy throwing chairs around wherever you are.
That's right. There's another story I want to tell that has to do with leadership. I think that one important facet of leadership is failure, and I think failures can teach us and show us the way. And as an example of that, when I was a struggling New York theater actor, I was cast in my first Broadway play. And I had only been out of acting school 5 or 6 years at that point, but I was really struggling. So this was a huge opportunity for me, huge. And I got very nervous about it. And I was trying to impress people with my performance. And I was thinking about like, oh, I could get a New York Times review, or I could get a Tony nomination, or I could get signed at the William Morris agency. Like I kind of had these stars in my eyes, and I was kind of overwhelmed by it. And then we were rehearsing the play, and I was lost, and I was bad, and I was not good in this play. And I was almost fired. And it was a horrific experience, and I sucked. And there's nothing worse than sucking in a play, because you have to do it like in a Broadway play. We ran 5 months. So 8 shows a week for 5 months. And I knew I was terrible, and I had to go in. I was trying to improve my performance, I'd always try and get better at it. But if you don't rehearse it right, you just can't get quite back on track. So you have to really use that rehearsal period. And I would sometimes, my wife was going to graduate school at the time in Iowa, and I would call her sobbing at night and just like, this is miserable and I'm terrible. I got bad reviews. It was a nightmare, and it was incredibly painful. And so when the play ended, I was like, you know what? I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to try and please people. I'm never going to get overwhelmed with pressure. I'm never going to just try and be some kind of actor that I'm not. I need to embrace myself, my natural quirkiness, my natural oddness. I'm not going to people please in the same way. I fired my terrible agents at the time and moved forward. And I think about that all the time, because that was a painful 6 months of my life. I mean, it was a horrible, painful 6 months of my life, but I'm so grateful for it, because I never would have played Dwight had I not failed at this Broadway play, because failing at it allowed me to embrace me as a quirky, offbeat character guy who I've got my own unique, weird spin on playing the characters that I do. And I don't really give an F about, pleasing people, and I'm just going to do my thing. And having learned that lesson, I was then open to being cast ultimately as Dwight. And had I not failed, I probably never would have gotten the role, honestly. So I think it's really, again, we think of leaders as like strong people who know the answers and have it all figured out, but it's our failures that can really guide us, and that we can, if we learn from them and shift our perspective, because that's what it's all about, shifting perspective, right? That's what COVID has done. And then our failures shift our perspective about who we are and what we're doing, and allow us to go in a new direction.
I love it. Thank you for telling that story. And this is not about me, thankfully, because I would have 12 or 15 failure stories to tell you how they've shaped my life. But yeah, I would love to talk to you about Soul Pancake. I'm interested in, I've followed it since the beginning, and like many people probably thought, oh, Dwight is actually into spirituality. I didn't know that. And when Soul Pancake came out, I'm like, that's cool. Let's see what this is about.
Yeah, well, when we stayed on the air, and it was season 2, and it was obviously all of a sudden we were a hit. Like we went from almost being canceled to being a hit like immediately. And then we had an Emmy nomination and all of a sudden we were on the radar and realized, oh, I'm going to have a job for a while, because actors never have jobs for long periods of time. But I was under a 7-year television contract. And I was like, I'm going to be working probably at least for 7 years, if not more. It ended up being 9 years and 200 episodes, which was fantastic. And so I was speaking with a bunch of my friends, some of whom were more in the tech world. And I was like, I want to do something positive. I'm going to have resources coming in. I have a name. I have a platform. I want to create something positive on the web. So after, I won't go into all the deliberations around that and consultations around that, but we came up with this idea of Soul Pancake, which was exploring life's biggest questions and unifying people around the discussions of life's biggest questions. And yes, a lot of those questions were around spirituality. We weren't afraid of talking about God and death and the meaning of life, but there were also philosophical questions, psychological questions, questions of being an artist and creativity, which was an important part of Soul Pancake. And it was a really nice venture, and it was going well. We wrote a New York Times best-selling book, and there were a lot of positive aspects to it, but it wasn't really succeeding as a business model. So we had to pivot. About 2 or 3 years into Soul Pancake, we kind of circled the wagons and we're like, guys, this is not really sustainable. We're just not going to make the money that we need to make around this. And we're like, well, what is working? And we looked at what is working, and the video content that we made was working. It was getting a lot of hits and attention. We had been doing videos for Oprah Winfrey and some other television networks and some brands. And we're like, we're way better at making video content than we are at having a destination conversational website. So we did a pivot, we did a shift to what was working about our original idea. And we shifted from talking about life's big questions to making inspiring and uplifting content. Our motto then shifted to, we make stuff that matters. And there's a lot of production companies out there, but very few of them have a mission. So we wanted to be a company with a mission. We wanted to have a mission to make the world a better place, and to have that be woven into the DNA of who we are as a company. So we became a digital media company and have been very successful ever since there. We have over 1 billion video views on hundreds of viral videos on, you've probably seen dozens of our videos and not even known that was a Soul Pancake video. Kid President, My Last Days. We had a lot of very successful viral digital media shows. And we worked with brands and with companies. We're not doing that so much anymore. We sold the company to another great company in Los Angeles that has a mission and a vision called Participant Media. And so now we're kind of the digital arm of Participant Media. But it was an incredible adventure, and it was an experiment, because so few production companies had a mission. There, production entities in LA that you chase where the money is. Like if they want you to do Pringles commercials, you do Pringles commercials. They want you to do reality TV, you do reality TV. But we wanted to really focus on uplifting, inspiring content, especially for young people. And we wanted to be successful and pay people and have employees and make a profit. And we were thankfully successful at both. So it's been a great ride. And speaking of leadership, here I was, this dorky character actor, who had just bombed on a Broadway play 8 years previous. And here I am running a company. I never acted as the CEO, but I was one of the founders and helping make, key decisions. And again, it's going back to capacity. I had no idea in my life that I had the capacity to build and help lead and direct a company, with 30 employees. So it was win-win.
When I was able to see Soul Pancake first coming out in your book, begin to realize your faith background as Baha'i. And at LeaderCast, we have people from various faith backgrounds, and some people don't have a faith background, but we always encourage people when they present at LeaderCast to bring their whole self. And so, if your faith has formed you, we're interested in that. And if you're willing to talk about it, I would wonder how your faith journey has made you the sort of leader you are and the sort of person you are.
Well, thank you for asking that. And I really appreciate that. Shows a great deal of kind of maturity and wisdom that you would allow people to incorporate all facets of themselves, including their faith, because faith is a very important part of, well, frankly, being an American. It's woven into the fabric of of America. This country was founded on pilgrims not being able to practice the religion the way they wanted in Europe and coming someplace to practice their faith. Um, just, I'm a member of the Baha'i faith, as you said. And yeah, I would not have had the career that I've had. I would not have had the variety of experience that I've had without my faith. And I'm really grateful for it. I earlier in my life had a lot of mental health struggles. I had a lot of anxiety and depression issues, and my faith helped steer me through that, helped guide me through that.
You mentioned mental health. Could you talk a little bit about the role that you see a leader in an organization has when it comes to helping people with their mental health or creating a spirit of mindfulness at work, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's so important these days, especially if you're leading and working with young people, because a lot of people over 40 or 50 don't really understand that there is a mental health epidemic going on in the country right now. And it really is an epidemic. Um, you can just Google the statistics. I won't go into them, but anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, all of these numbers have gone way up over the last 10 or 15 years, especially in young people. So it's super important to have a compassionate understanding about mental health issues, and that they're part of the social fabric these days. I hope that we can work them out. There's a number of, we can talk about social media and screens and consumerism and, the degradation of the family unit. There's just lots of different ways in which um, that affect mental health. But I think for a leader in the workplace looking at mental health, I mean, we need to understand that there are a couple of tools. Meditation is a really important tool that I use on a daily basis. And it doesn't have to be anything woo woo, hippie, weird. Meditation can simply be closing your eyes for 5 minutes and trying to still your mind, because we're sometimes a victim of our thoughts. The Buddhists call it the monkey mind, where thoughts are popping around like a popcorn popper all day long. And we get screens and emails and texts and, and calls and it's blah, 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 blah. But we're not our thoughts. Thoughts, our thinking capacity is an important tool in our toolkit as human beings, but it's not who we are. We are not our thinking. It's Descartes was wrong about that. I think, therefore I am. It's I am, therefore I am. And thinking is one of the things that I can do. Meditation is simply a process to quiet the mind. And in so doing, it's kind of just like, when your computer's acting haywire and you just simply reboot it and all of a sudden things are working again. You're just like, that makes zero sense. And you always say that when your mom or your grandma calls and like, my phone is doing it. Let's reboot it and see. And sure enough, you reboot it and it fixes it a whole bunch of times. So meditation is like a reboot, like that. And another really important tool that has helped me a great deal, and we've done a number of videos about this on Soul Pancake, is gratitude. And you can, again, here's something to Google, is the positive effects of gratitude. It's astonishing. Gratitude helps your mental health. It helps your physical health. People that are grateful go to the doctor less. People that express gratitude live longer. People that express gratitude get promoted more. People that express gratitude, end up making more money. They have a higher quality of life. They have greater well-being. So, because I think we're wired, Joe, our caveman ancestors were wired to look for what's wrong, right? We're wired to look at, oh, there's a shaking in the bushes. That could be a bear that's going to eat me, courtesy of Dwight Schrute. So we're always kind of looking for what's wrong and what's bad, and that's our natural tendency. So when you shift to gratitude, like, I'm alive, I have a nice shirt, it's a beautiful day out, I'm talking to Joe and future leaders, I'm grateful for these things, that in this practice of gratitude, so many things can shift for the positive, and it especially can help in the mental health sphere. There's a number of different ways to do it. You can start a gratitude text chain. There's apps, but bringing gratitude into the workplace, everyone sharing something they're grateful for, it just, again, we're talking about perspective shifting, just shifts the perspective just a little bit, just 3 degrees this way, but that makes all the difference.
Well, thank you. Not trying to be ironic around gratitude at all. I'm very grateful that we connected and that you were able to share with our audience, and grateful for your life experience, and even more than that, you being the sort of person willing to pull from it and talk about your failures and your successes in a humble way.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my story and to connect with possible leaders, future leaders, big, important leaders. Joe, thank you so much for having me.